So what is happening in the social media environment these days? Now, the thing is, we do know that within certain forums that are promoting hate narratives and extremist ideas, it's an echo chamber of like-minded people mutually reinforcing their own ideas. But you see, what happens in that process is we may see it as an extremist idea, but to them, inside this little bubble that they live in, it's normal. To them, it is perfectly legitimate. So this normalizing of hate narratives through the echo chamber effect is significant because that makes them feel as if what they are saying isn't all that different. What they are saying is actually legitimate. And in fact, they're doing the right thing. And the thing about the algorithms on the internet, I mean, the search algorithms, it is what you're looking for is what you will find. So for example, if you're looking for certain narratives or certain literature that's actually vilifying or demonizing a certain group, you will find it, all right? The literature, the search algorithm sort of maneuvers you towards those kind of things. Of course, internet and social media companies have done a lot of things to prevent this from happening. But the nature of the algorithm is such that it is able to actually facilitate this process. A few other things about extremism you need to take note of. Number one, it's about these absolutist views. Those inside these echo chambers, inside these extremist groups, see things in black and white, good and bad. There is no middle ground. The second thing about extremism is they need to demonize someone, vilify a certain group as the cause of all their grievances. You need to blame someone, all right? The last thing is that the extremist views are polarizing. They're exclusivists. They basically divide society. And that is what they seek to do. There is an in-group that they feel that is their own group, and everybody else is on the outside. Now, the thing about these echo chambers is that you are not able to get your other alternate perspectives that add balance to the argument inside. And when you live inside this bubble, what happens is that the members themselves, they sort of filter away any kind of alternate views or challenging views that confront their beliefs. Now, the problem with that many social media companies and internet companies are grappling with is that the terms of service are sometimes quite fluid because globally, there are a lot of progressive narratives that talk about the right of free speech and the need to have critical dialogue and so on and so forth. So what kind of content is actually constructive critical dialogue and what actually is extremism and hate speech? It may seem very clear, but when you're looking at thousands of narratives in which there are a lot of subtle variations, a lot of nuances in that narrative, it may not be that easy to spot out. And of course, the people who are propagating these extremist narratives, they're very smart about it. They do know that they are being monitored. And sometimes what they do is on the main platform, they do not talk about their ideas, but they give a link to something else. They give an outlink to a hyperlink and so on that basically redirects the reader to a platform that is not as well monitored and in which they are basically able to get away with saying what they want. So these are some of the tactics and some of the strategies that are still making social media ideal for promoting hate narratives. Now let's look at some of the tactics that they're using to sort of hide these kinds of hate narrative and extremist narratives and so on. We do know that the algorithms in many search engines, they actually help to find some of these content. Now, what they are doing is that they do know that a lot of social media companies and internet firms are doing a lot to actually use their own detection mechanisms to find some of this content and take it down. And of course, they are cooperating with law enforcement and so on. But they are finding ways to actually circumvent all these measures. One of them is actually to hide the text. Now, the thing is that the keyword describing that particular video or that narrative may be quite benign. But what they do is that they actually embed the text, such that the algorithm will not be able to detect the embedded extremist text. Another thing they actually do is that the image itself may be actually quite benign, but they actually embed an extremist image onto it. And likewise for external links, they actually add links in videos they know will not be taken down because the content is quite moderate, but there are links which actually lead individuals towards more extremist content. Can we have the next slide? And what else are we seeing? We are seeing individuals who are actually playing the role of an amplifier. And these amplifier accounts, what they're doing is they're actually collecting all these low-key hate narratives that are sympathetic to extremist ideas, and they're sort of disseminating it out. Think of them as middlemen, all right? And think of them as hubs. So they are actually not the ones generating the actual extremist content, but they are highly influential because they are the ones who are basically sending it out to everyone. And they use a lot of tactics, for example, the use of bots that imitate human accounts, or they could be just people with fake identities known as sock puppets. Now, they also practice a strategy of using cloaked accounts. In other words, it works something like this. They actually pretend to be a member of the group that they hate. And they say things in a very derogatory or instigating manner that makes people actually hate the targeted group even more. So these kind of cloak accounts, of course, play into the narratives and actually sort of prove the narratives of this extremist group. And what else are they trying to do? They are trying to hide their hate content in a way that it's that actually might seem actually very benevolent. For example, they will not outrightly say that they are out to promote violence and so on and so forth, but they may actually go on very benign terms such as, no, what we are trying to do is that we are protecting our own people from being marginalized and so on and so forth. No, it's our right of free speech that we are defending. So that's the thing about extremism. They will portray themselves in a very positive light. And of course, there's a lot of hate hoax going around. And I mentioned a bit about this, but misinformation that sort of misleads people towards having a negative view of the group that is being villainized by these extremist movements. So how can workplaces actually be affected by this? Let's take a step back. Think of the kind of built up grievances and personal trauma that's happening over the pandemic. You know, it's actually creating an ideal environment for all this hate content to thrive. It may start actually looking like a very normal criticism or even a joke, you know, but somewhere along the way, it actually embeds hate narratives vilifying a particular group, blaming certain policies, and so on and so forth. And of course, look, we all have some form of chatting app, you know, whether it's Telegram or WhatsApp and so on and so forth. And it's an ideal outlet for some of these narratives to actually come, you know, get into the conversation of some groups within this chatting app. And of course, what are they doing? They're getting very clever at propagating their ideas and keeping it concealed. They are known, as you can see from the earlier video, they actually change their names, use different punctuations or spelling to avoid being detected and banned by the various social media companies and internet groups. And of course, the last concern is about working from home and home-based learning, the lack of supervision. People, you know, when they are unmonitored, they have time to explore. So in terms of indicators, this is basically to elaborate on some of the indicators that my colleague from the Home Affairs has talked about. So let's look at some potential indicators and just keep them simplified. Ridicule, resentment towards certain groups, vilifying them. And of course, the other thing is fixation. These individuals who get involved in extremist groups can't seem to stop. It's a fixation, talking about them, spreading narratives of hate towards them. And of course, ultimately, when you see a sympathy towards violent solutions. So what can you do? My colleague in MOM has spoke about the SG Secure at workplaces. Look out for these advisories. Don't live in a bubble. you do need to keep informed about what's happening in the world because it can impact on you. Workplace, good habits, good behavior, and a kind of good environment that you can nurture in the workplace, setting clear lines of unacceptable behavior or the kind of narratives that should not be talked about, and unacceptable communications. Keep conversations going with your staff. Identify certain tensions early, have that engagement. And of course, in terms of cybersecurity and so on, you can actually put certain tripwires in which you can detect insiders when they actually try to access certain information they're not supposed to have access to. And of course, teach the youth media literacy. How do you discern what is actually extremist, what are actually extremist narratives? Teach them the proper ways to think critically.